It's 1847. Night shift. Fairbanks is buried under snow again. Not the soft kind, but the kind that hits like needles in the wind. Minus 34 degrees. Streets dead silent. Even the highway lights look frozen in place. My name is Elias Morgan, emergency physician, Fairbanks Memorial Hospital. Normally, night shifts are predictable. Hypothermia, frostbite, drunks, the occasional snowmobile accident. Things you learn to manage with your eyes half closed. But tonight, something feels wrong. The corridors are too quiet. The day team left faster than usual. A couple of them said they felt off, but nobody could explain what that meant. Just a tension in the air. Alaska does that to people. But this feels different. Lauren, my night shift nurse, is already in triage, warming her hands on a portable heater. She tells me dispatch logged a few strange calls earlier. People complaining they suddenly couldn't breathe. No fever, no cough, no chest pain. That alone is odd, but not unheard of. This cold can turn anyone's lungs into sandpaper. I put my coat in the locker, clip my ID badge, and, for some reason, start the recorder I use for medical notes. No idea why. Some instinct telling me I'll need this tonight. I walk down the main hallway. The lights flicker like they always do, but tonight it feels unsettling, like the power grid is holding its breath. Lauren hands me the shift report. 2 shortness of breath cases from the east side, 1 from the outskirts. All men, mid-40s to 60s. Low oxygen saturation, no fever, no crackles typical of pneumonia. The day doctors labeled them atypical respiratory distress. But atypical doesn't begin to describe what's coming. Then it happens, the moment the night turns. The automatic doors burst open, wind howling in. A man stumbles inside, supported by his son. He's panting hard, like every breath is scraping the inside of his chest. Lips blue, eyes bloodshot. But he's awake. Too awake. Can't get air, he forces out. Lauren gets him on a stretcher. I place my stethoscope on his chest. What I hear is not fluid, not inflammation. It sounds like someone crumpling soaked paper inside his lungs. I've never heard anything like it. We rush a chest X-ray. Within seconds, the image appears on the monitor, and his lungs are white, completely. A solid sheet of opacity, the kind you see in end-stage pneumonia. Except he's talking. Except he shouldn't be alive with lungs that look like that. Lauren whispers, "Elias, what the hell is this?" I open my mouth to answer. I don't even know what I'm about to say. When the triage doors slam again, 2 more patients walk in. Different ages, different parts of town. Same symptoms. Breathless. Rapid onset. Eyes terrified. Lauren looks at me. And for the first time in years, I don't have an answer. The man from earlier is now on high-flow oxygen. It's barely helping. His oxygen saturation sits at 78%. That's the kind of number that usually means intubation. But he's still talking, still conscious, still fighting for every breath like his lungs are filling with invisible cement. Lauren moves the 2 new arrivals into separate bays. A middle-aged woman from the west side. A teenager from a downtown bus stop. No connection. No shared locations. No shared contacts. Nothing that makes sense. I listen to the woman's lungs. Exactly the same sound. That wet, crushing paper noise. It's not fluid. It's not bronchospasm. It's something else. Something deeper. The teenager is in worse shape. Pale, sweaty, breathing fast like he's sprinted up a mountain. But he keeps insisting he felt fine 2 hours ago. 2 hours. That's not how respiratory infections spread, not even the worst ones. Lauren brings their vitals. All 3 patients have no fever, no elevated white blood cells, no productive cough, identical lung opacities. That alone already breaks every rule in the textbook. I open the patient files side by side, looking for anything connecting them. Age, gender, neighborhood, medical history, it's all different. But then I notice something. Oxygen saturation, rate of decline. All 3 charts show the same pattern, a drop of nearly 20% in under 1 hour. Lauren leans over my shoulder. What does that mean? It means, I say slowly, whatever this is, it's spreading inside them faster than we can measure. I check their throats. Clear. No swelling, no redness. But when I check the capillary refill on their fingers, something stops me cold. Tiny bruises. Pinprick dots along the nail beds. Fresh, expanding, early petechiae, internal bleeding. But how? Their lungs don't sound like they're bleeding. Their hearts are stable. Their blood pressure is normal. Nothing matches. Nothing fits. Lauren bites her lip. Should we call Anchorage? Ask for an infectious disease consult? I nod. We'll escalate it. But first I need one more piece of data. I pull up the CT scan from the first patient, the one we rushed moments ago. It loads slowly, like even the machine is hesitant to show me what's inside. And when the image appears, Lauren covers her mouth. His lungs look shredded, not physically torn, but infiltrated by something that doesn't belong there. Not fluid, not blood, not inflammation. It looks spread out, like a fungus pattern, but too uniform for that, too aggressive, too fast. I swallow hard. This isn't pneumonia, I say, more to myself than to Lauren. She whispers, then what is it? Before I can answer, the intercom crackles. Dr. Morgan to ER entrance. We have 3 more walk-ins with breathing difficulties. 3 more. I glance at Lauren. She already knows. In the span of 20 minutes, we're facing the beginnings of something we're not trained for, something we don't recognize. The first pattern isn't a diagnosis, it's a warning. Everything changed in the last hour. Our first patient didn't stabilize at all. He collapsed further, like his entire respiratory system was giving up one section at a time. His oxygen dropped so fast it didn't even make medical sense. We put him on ventilation, but his chest kept jerking in these sharp spasms. Not seizures, just something happening inside his lungs that we couldn't access or control. None of the labs are matching anything. Not flu, not RSV, not any coronavirus we know. Cultures are coming back clean, which should be impossible considering what's happening to their bodies. The internal bleeding is getting worse. It started behind the eyes, faint red shadows at first, and then along the gums, then every needle site. The color along his ribs turned this bluish gray, as if his skin was bruising from the inside out. I've only seen something remotely close in hypothetical CDC scenarios. Those were simulations. This This is happening on a hospital bed in front of me, and he isn't the only one anymore. Another patient came in from the Mountain View district. A woman, mid-40s, no relation to him. Same symptoms: fever, labored breathing, bruising spreading under the skin in branching patterns. Her eyes had the same unfocused, distant look. Not confusion, more like her mind was drifting somewhere else. Before we could even move her to isolation, a teenager collapsed in the waiting room. No fever, no warning. Just a sudden stream of blood from the nose and then coughing up thin, watery red. He didn't know either of the other two. Different parts of Anchorage, different lives. No contact. 3 separate patients with the exact same impossible condition. This isn't contamination. This isn't coincidence. It's already spreading. I requested support from Juneau, infectious disease specialists, additional equipment, anything. But the storm shut everything down. No flights, no transport. We're cut off. Completely. What scares me most is how fast this thing is moving through a city that's practically frozen in place. Cold slows viruses. Cold stops outbreaks. But whatever this is, it doesn't care about the rules. I tried explaining the urgency to administration, but they think I'm overreacting. They want official guidance before taking action. Meanwhile, I'm standing here watching something outrun protocol in real time, and I keep coming back to the same terrible thought. If these 3 patients are carrying the same pathogen, then we didn't discover patient 0 tonight. We missed them. By hours, maybe days. And now the clock is already running. By the early hours, the pace of deterioration is relentless. Each patient seems to be racing against some invisible clock, their bodies betraying them faster than we can respond. The fisherman from earlier is barely recognizable. Skin mottled, lips dark, lungs wheezing in a rhythm that no ventilator can match. Every breath is a battle. Every heartbeat a struggle to survive against something we cannot see, cannot name. The woman from Mountain View is worsening too. Her breathing is shallow, uneven, each inhale like scraping ice through a narrow tube. The bruising across her chest has darkened, spreading like ink in water, and her eyes, once alert, now have a distant, unfocused look. She whispers occasionally, fragments of words that don't make sense. I catch fire, can't breathe, it's inside, and my stomach tightens every time. The teenager is a different horror. He went from pale and anxious to cold and shaking. Blood continues to seep from every orifice. Nose, gums, even IV sites. It's not massive at first, just enough to stain his clothing, enough to make the nurses freeze. But the rate is increasing. It's exponential, not linear. Each minute he loses more of himself. And yet, his mind is flickering. There is awareness, but only flashes, only glimpses before he drifts again. I've started recording everything, vitals, progression, subtle changes, everything. Because if we don't survive, this recording might be the only proof of what happened here. The patterns are starting to become clear. Rapid pulmonary collapse followed by internal hemorrhage, all without a traceable origin. The virus, if that's what it is, moves faster than anything I've ever encountered. More patients are arriving. Different ages, different neighborhoods, no known contact with any of the first 3. And yet, the symptoms are identical. The speed, the internal bleeding, the lung opacity, it's consistent. My mind is racing to predict what's coming next. But there are no precedents. Nothing in medical history matches this. Lauren, my nurse, is barely keeping it together. She's exhausted, hands shaking as she monitors vitals, adjusts oxygen levels, and tries to comfort patients who don't even understand what's happening to them. I can see her questioning everything, wondering how we got here, why this is happening in Fairbanks of all places, in the middle of a storm that isolates us from the outside world. I've called Anchorage multiple times, but the storm has cut all communication. Flights are grounded. Specialists can't reach us. We are completely alone with a virus that doesn't follow rules, doesn't wait for consent, doesn't care about protocols. By now, the hospital feels like a pressure cooker. Alarms beep constantly, monitors flash red, patients gasp and cough, blood staining sheets and gowns. Each new arrival adds weight to an already impossible situation. We can't isolate fast enough. We can't treat fast enough. And still, more walk in or are carried in by family members who are too frightened, too desperate to leave them outside in the cold. Every instinct I have screams that this is far beyond a localized outbreak. If it spreads this quickly in a single hospital, in a single city, then Anchorage is already exposed. And once it reaches the population at large, the scale of what's coming is unimaginable. I keep asking myself how we can survive this night, how we can slow it, even a little. But deep down, I know that we are running out of options. Every second that passes, the collapse accelerates, the bleeding spreads, the lungs fail, and the storm outside ensures that no help is coming. And I can only do what I can do: record it, monitor it, try to keep as many alive as possible for as long as possible. Because soon, that may be all we have, a record of what happened, a testament to the night everything changed. The hospital is crumbling under its own weight. Rooms that were supposed to hold 2 patients are now crowded with 4, sometimes 5. Hallways echo with coughing, shallow wheezes, and the occasional scream. We've barricaded the ER entrances as best we can, improvising isolation zones with temporary curtains, stretchers, and any doors we can lock. It barely makes a difference. The first patients are deteriorating faster than ever. The fisherman's lungs sound like collapsing paper with each breath. His eyes are sunken, bruising creeping along the sides of his face. The woman from Mountain View has started bleeding from the IV site uncontrollably. Her oxygen barely registers, and she is slipping into unconsciousness. The teenager is fading in and out, convulsing subtly between breaths, a constant struggle that no one can ease. I've sent an urgent alert to Anchorage, describing every detail, every strange symptom, every anomaly. I beg for guidance. I beg for containment. I beg for help. And I get silence. Static. Either the storm is cutting through every line, or no one wants to hear what I'm seeing. Lauren is exhausted, moving from patient to patient, shouting instructions to nurses who are nearly in tears. I catch her muttering, "This isn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not like this." She looks at me, her eyes pleading, asking if I know what we're dealing with. I don't. None of us do. And every time I see her glance at the monitors, I realize how powerless we are. The newest arrivals are worse than the first. A man in his 50s collapses while being wheeled in. His lungs are already opaque on the X-ray before he even reaches a bed. Another woman from the outskirts of the city clutches her chest, gasping, bruising spreading across her torso. Each new patient makes it harder to isolate anyone. I start thinking in shifts, in patterns. Which patients can survive until morning? Which beds are safe enough to hold someone for even a few hours? And even as I try to calculate, I realize the virus, or whatever this is, doesn't care. It spreads too fast, moves through bodies too quickly, and respects no boundaries, no protocols, no containment. By now, the isolation zones feel like cages. Patients are aware of one another's suffering. The sounds of coughing, gasping, and blood-stained sheets echo constantly. No one is calm. Everyone is afraid. And there's a sense that even this makeshift separation is meaningless. The disease isn't just moving from patient to patient. It is everywhere in the air, in the rooms, in the fabric of the hospital. I watch the monitors, recording every drop in saturation, every heart rate fluctuation, every bruise that appears. I try to remain rational, but the stress is immense. We are trying to contain something that is already beyond containment. Lauren's voice breaks as she reports another patient going into shock. I hear the tremor in her tone and know she feels the same helplessness I do. We are doing everything humanly possible, and it isn't enough. I take a deep breath and record it all. Every symptom, every failure, every desperate attempt. Because if this night ends with me alone, if the hospital falls silent, except for the gasping of the dying, at least there will be a record. A warning, something that might survive beyond the storm and the collapse. Isolation doesn't save us. It slows nothing. But it's all we have to do while the storm rages outside and the disease rages inside. Now about Lorraine. It started subtly at first. She complained of fatigue, just a small, quiet thing she tried to laugh off. "Long night," she said, rubbing her temples. But by the third hour, I noticed the changes. Her hands were cold, the tips bluish. Her breathing was shallow, uneven, almost like the patients we were fighting to keep alive. She insisted it was just exhaustion, just stress. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But the subtle bruising along her forearms, the faint spots on her cheeks, they told a different story. I asked her to sit, to rest, and she looked at me with those wide eyes that used to be calm and steady. And I realized she was scared, really scared. And not just scared of the patients or the storm, but scared for herself. She went to check on the teenager in bed 5 and came back pale. She coughed once, sharp and wet, and I saw it. Tiny flecks of red on her gloves. I froze. She shook her head, whispered, "It's nothing, just a cough." But I knew it was the same pattern, same as the first patients, same as the fisherman, same as the woman from Mountain View. Her energy began to crumble. Tasks she normally handled without thought now took every ounce of focus. She dropped an oxygen mask and cursed under her breath, something she'd never do. I tried to take over, but she insisted on helping. She wouldn't stop. She couldn't stop. That stubbornness, that dedication, it was part of who she is. And it's what made watching her fall apart so unbearable. By the middle of the night, she was coughing more frequently. Bruises were spreading across her arms and torso, subtle at first, but unmistakable. Her breathing was shallow, and her voice was weak. She looked at me during one of the quieter moments and said, almost apologetically, "I don't feel right." I didn't have words. Nothing I could say could stop what was happening. All I could do was watch, monitor, record. Her symptoms escalated in the same pattern we'd been seeing. oxygen dropping, internal bleeding, lungs filling, and still she tried to keep moving, keep helping, keep herself from falling apart in front of the patients. I could see the fear settling into her eyes, the kind that makes someone look smaller, vulnerable in a way I had never seen from her. And I knew in that moment that this disease, whatever it is, doesn't just break bodies. It breaks the people trying to fight it. Even as I tried to stabilize the other patients, I could not stop thinking about her. How quickly it had moved, how indiscriminate it was, and how little time we had. Lauren, the one I relied on to hold everything together during the long, impossible night, was now becoming a patient, and there was nothing I could do to save her. I continued recording. Every cough, every bruise, every faltering step she took. Because if she fell completely, and if I didn't make it either, this log might be all that remained of what happened in these rooms. She stumbled briefly as she adjusted the ventilator on the teenager. I caught her, holding her steady against my chest. Her breathing was ragged, lips tinged blue. She whispered, "I'll be fine. I just need to help them." I wanted to argue, to force her to lie down, but I didn't. I couldn't. The patients needed her. I needed her. And in that fragile, desperate balance, I realized we were all running on borrowed time, clinging to whatever strength remained. By dawn, the pattern was undeniable. Lauren was showing the same trajectory as the others: rapid pulmonary collapse, internal bleeding, and fading consciousness. I knew then that she would not survive long unless the disease itself slowed. And I also knew that it wouldn't. The storm outside was relentless. The hospital was failing. And inside, the ones I cared about most, patients and the only nurse I could trust, were succumbing, one by one, to something I still could not name. The first patient died in my arms. It wasn't sudden. It was slow enough for me to feel every subtle failure. Every second, his body betrayed itself. I held his hand as the color drained from his skin, watched his pulse flutter and fade, his chest heaving in desperate, ineffective gasps. Death had a rhythm here, but it wasn't natural. It was violent, cruel, and impossible. I've seen death in ERs, in ICUs, in mass casualties, but never like this. Never with such rapid, precise dismantling of a body from the inside out. Lauren was next to me, trying to stay composed. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked the monitors, repositioned the IV, adjusted the oxygen mask. I noticed the subtle bluish tinge at her fingertips. She brushed it off, muttering about stress and long hours. But I knew anyone who had seen what we had seen in the last hours could not fool themselves. Something had already begun in her. Something relentless and unstoppable. The woman from Mountain View convulsed violently next. Her oxygen saturation plunged, her skin mottled with bruising, spreading in patterns that no one could explain. I tried intubation. I tried manual ventilation. I tried medications. Every protocol I could think of. But it was futile. Her blood pressure collapsed. Her lips turned a deep, unnatural purple. And I realized we were powerless. I held her hand, whispered encouragement, though I knew it meant nothing. The teenager, 17 years old, went from alert to barely conscious in minutes. His coughing was wet and desperate, blood streaking the sheets. His nails darkened, his pulse erratic. I tried to adjust the ventilator, reposition him, anything to slow what was happening. He opened his eyes once, looked at me with terror and confusion, and then drifted again. I could see him fading, a life extinguishing piece by piece before my eyes. I shouted instructions, directed nurses, tried to coordinate care, but every new patient arriving brought the same pattern. Rapid oxygen collapse, internal hemorrhage, pulmonary opacity, and fading consciousness. The storm outside ensured that no outside help could arrive. Anchorage, Juneau, the CDC, none of them could reach us. Isolation was total. We were alone, trapped in a building that was supposed to protect life, now filled with the dying. Lauren tried to remain professional, but I could hear her sobbing softly between instructions. She would never admit it aloud, but I saw the fear in her eyes. She looked at me once, silently asking if I knew how to stop this, and I had to shake my head. I didn't. No one did. And each new patient slipping through our hands confirmed it. By now, patients were arriving in waves, one after another, all showing identical symptoms, all collapsing in minutes. A middle-aged man was brought in by his wife, unconscious before we even reached him with a bed. Another woman, complaining first of slight shortness of breath, began bleeding through her IV sites and lips in seconds. A pattern was emerging, not just the symptoms, but the timing. Each patient followed the same trajectory: onset, collapse, bleeding, pulmonary failure, unconsciousness. The pace was exponential, relentless. I began to measure everything. Every drop in oxygen, every change in blood pressure, every bruise, every sign of internal bleeding. I recorded it all, not for research, not for reports, but because if we died here tonight, someone had to know what happened. Someone had to understand how fast this thing moved, how indiscriminate it was, and how powerless we were. The weight of responsibility pressed down like snow on a roof. Each life lost was another failure. Each breath I couldn't save another reminder that the rules no longer applied. I tried to compartmentalize, to push past emotion and focus on action, but the sheer volume of dying was overwhelming. The sounds, the smells, the sight of bruised, bloodied, gasping bodies. It burrowed into my mind and wouldn't leave. At one point, I stepped into the center of the ER, surrounded by beds crammed with patients, blood-stained sheets, monitors flashing red, alarms screaming. I looked at the faces of the dying, some awake, some slipping, all terrified. I realized fully, we were witnessing something beyond containment, beyond comprehension. Nothing we did mattered to this force that was consuming life faster than we could respond. I pressed record again. Every gasp, every moan, every faltering heartbeat. I recorded Lauren as she moved desperately between beds, as she tried to stabilize patients even while succumbing herself. She coughed blood at one point and whispered that she would be fine, that she had to help them. I knew she wasn't fine, and I knew she wouldn't survive long if this continued. By dawn, the first wave had passed. The patients we had admitted earliest were gone, their bodies silent and still. Others were fading fast. New patients were arriving, and the pattern remained identical. It was not an outbreak. It was a collapse. A hospital, a city, and the lives within it were unraveling in real time, and no protocol, no training, no human effort could stop it. I continued recording. It may be the only evidence of what happened here, the only warning for whoever comes after. The storm rages outside. Inside we fight fail and watch everything break around us. And I can only do the next possible thing: measure, monitor, and keep alive whoever I can, for as long as I can, knowing that the breaking point has already passed. By the time the sun barely pierced the storm clouds, the hospital was unrecognizable. Hallways that had once been orderly were now chaos incarnate. Stretchers lining every corridor, monitors beeping in frantic discord, nurses and doctors moving between the living and dying in a desperate rhythm that seemed too fast, too precise, and impossibly cruel. I couldn't help but think back to COVID, the pandemic that swept through the world only a few years ago. Back then, we understood what we were facing, at least in some measure. We had protocols, isolation wards, ventilators, masks, vaccines in development. COVID had killed millions, yes, but it had followed patterns. It spread through contact, through respiratory droplets, through identifiable chains. There were rules, even if brutal. We had a map. We had hope. This is nothing like that. This doesn't follow patterns we can trace. It doesn't care about containment, about distance, about timing. COVID moved fast, but it waited. This thing moves faster than thought, faster than fear, faster than human comprehension. By the time we realize a patient is infected, it has already consumed them, and then it moves on. The new arrivals mirrored the trajectory of the first wave. A man in his 40s from the north side collapsed before we could even assign him a bed. His lungs were opaque on the X-ray almost immediately, a solid white canvas betraying the severity of the disease. Bruising appeared beneath his skin like ink spreading in water. I tried the interventions we used on COVID patients: oxygen, antivirals, supportive care, but it was useless. The protocols that once saved lives now felt like fiction. Lauren moved frantically between the beds, checking vitals, administering drugs, doing everything we could think of. And yet, even she could not keep up. Every patient's decline was faster than the last, their bodies shutting down in a rhythm that made my heart race and my hands shake. She coughed once, blood flecking her gloves, and whispered that she felt weak. The comparison to COVID was no longer theoretical. It was terrifyingly real. We had survived a global pandemic, and yet here, in this hospital, we were powerless against something far more rapid, far more indiscriminate. I began to document everything in detail: the timing, the symptoms, the rate of organ failure, the internal bleeding. I recorded the faint bruising along fingers and gums, the pulmonary collapse, the neurological symptoms as consciousness flickered in and out. I compared it in my notes to COVID cases, trying to make sense, to find some pattern, some anomaly that might help us fight it. But there was none. Nothing in our experience with COVID could prepare us for this. Patients who arrived 20 minutes apart deteriorated simultaneously. Their vital signs mirrored each other with uncanny precision. It was as if a single, invisible clock dictated the pace of collapse, and we were merely spectators. We were overwhelmed, understaffed, and outmatched. Every breath we managed to support, every heartbeat we stabilized, was a small, temporary reprieve. By mid-morning, the hospital was teetering on the edge of total collapse. Supplies were low. Equipment was failing. Nurses and doctors were exhausted, some succumbing to symptoms themselves. Lauren leaned against a wall for a moment, trying to catch her breath, whispering that this couldn't be happening here. I had no answer, no reassurance. COVID had taught us endurance, patience, resilience. This taught us futility. And still, more patients arrived. Some brought by frantic family members, others walking in alone, unaware of how quickly the disease would consume them. The storm outside ensured that no help would come, no additional resources, no reinforcements. We were alone in the center of a disaster that defied explanation, defied containment, and now defied hope. I continued recording. Every gasp, every cough, every drop in oxygen, every bruise, every moment of fading consciousness. If this log survives, it will tell the world that there are diseases faster, more ruthless, and more indiscriminate than anything we have seen, even COVID. If I survive, it is a warning. If I don't, it is a testament. And in the background, the storm rages, outside and inside, as the hospital and the city teeter on the edge of collapse. By late afternoon, it was no longer just the hospital. The storm had isolated Anchorage completely, but the effects of this disease were spilling out into the streets. I had to step outside briefly, checking on emergency vehicles arriving with patients, and what I saw made my stomach turn. People wandering aimlessly, some coughing violently, others clutching bruised arms or bleeding from their gums. The patterns we'd seen in the hospital were unfolding in the city, uncontrolled and unstoppable. The roads were nearly empty, save for emergency responders rushing in and out. Police cars, ambulances, and a few private vehicles, drivers moving cautiously, afraid of the unknown. There was no organized evacuation. There was no containment. People were scared, panicked, and the city infrastructure was starting to falter. Utilities were failing in pockets. Communication was spotty. Some neighborhoods had no power, no heat. And those residents, trapped in freezing temperatures, were vulnerable to the disease, just like the rest of us. I tried to get in touch with local authorities, with hospitals in surrounding towns, but the storm had crippled the lines. Even radio communication was unreliable. I kept comparing this to COVID in my mind. During the pandemic, we had warnings, time to prepare, some semblance of an organized response. Here, there was no preparation, no warning, no defense. It was chaos moving faster than the human mind could track. I returned to the hospital, knowing I would find more patients in the same impossible state. And I did. Each bed held someone deteriorating at a pace that made me feel dizzy. The internal bleeding, the pulmonary collapse, the fading consciousness, all identical, all happening faster than any intervention could slow. Lauren was still moving between them, coughing occasionally herself, blood flecking her gloves, but refusing to step back. She whispered to me once that the city outside must be falling apart too. I nodded, unable to articulate the magnitude of what we were facing. I walked through the hospital, observing the patterns, the way new patients arrived just as quickly as the old ones failed, the way the disease seemed to bypass immunity, previous health, or age. Children, adults, elderly, it didn't discriminate. By mid-afternoon, we had no empty beds. We stacked patients in corridors, improvised isolation zones, anything to separate them. But it didn't matter. The disease didn't care. It moved faster than we could react, faster than we could isolate, faster than any protocol, any plan, any hope. I kept thinking about COVID, about how we had survived that pandemic, at least in some sense. We had guidelines, vaccines, time to prepare. This was different. This wasn't a slow-moving wave we could ride out. This was a storm, A force, a collapse that ignored every lesson we had learned. The city itself was teetering, people isolated, hospitals overwhelmed, infrastructure failing, and the storm outside making it impossible for help to arrive. I looked out a window at the streets below. Ambulances were lining up, emergency responders moving between buildings, trying to help anyone they could reach. But even they were succumbing, coughing blood, bruising under their own skin. This wasn't containment. This wasn't medicine. This was survival, pure and desperate, with no guarantee that any of us would make it through the night. I returned to the ER and recorded everything. Every collapse, every cough, every drop in oxygen, every patient fading. If the hospital is the heart of this outbreak, the city is the body. And the body is failing fast, unstoppable. The comparison to COVID feels meaningless now. Nothing we knew could prepare us for this speed, this scale, this relentlessness. Every minute brings new arrivals. Every minute brings new deaths. Every minute. The city outside edges closer to the same collapse we're witnessing inside. And there is nothing we can do except record it, bear witness, and hope, against everything we know, that somehow, someone, somewhere will see this and understand the scope of what we faced. By evening, the hospital was almost unrecognizable. The corridors were crowded with the sick, the dying, and the few of us still clinging to consciousness. Monitors screamed, alarms rang, and every breath felt like a battle we were losing. The storm outside had not relented. The wind rattled windows, snow piled against doors, and outside, the city had begun to collapse under the weight of fear, isolation, and the invisible force consuming lives faster than any human could react. Lauren was still moving between beds, her own body failing, her hands trembling as she tried to stabilize patients. Every so often, she would cough, small flecks of blood on her gloves. Yet she refused to stop. I watched her quietly, recording everything. Her determination was heroic, but I could see the truth. The disease was relentless, and even she was not immune. I glanced at the patients we had first admitted. The fisherman, the woman from Mountain View, the teenager. They were gone. Their beds empty or covered in sheets I could barely touch without flinching. Others were fading, every second bringing more collapse. Each patient was a reminder that this was not a disease we could control. It was faster, more brutal, and more indiscriminate than anything I had ever encountered. Even COVID, with all its devastation, had seemed slow compared to this. COVID had rules, patterns, a way to track and respond. This had none. It moved, it consumed, and it left nothing behind except despair. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside. Lights flickered. Some sections of the hospital lost power. Alarms failed. Equipment sputtered. We were running on whatever remained functional, improvising treatments, trying interventions that might delay the inevitable for minutes, hours, if we were lucky. And yet, for every intervention, there was a patient succumbing faster than we could intervene. I stepped into the hallway, looking at the city through frost-covered windows. Ambulances lined the streets, emergency workers moving desperately, some coughing, some collapsing. The comparison to COVID hit me again. During that pandemic, the world had time to respond, to plan, to fight back. Here, there was no time, no hope beyond the present. The city was succumbing as rapidly as the hospital. Anchorage, isolated and trapped by snow and ice, was a perfect crucible for something that ignored every rule we knew. I recorded everything. Every gasp, every cough, every drop of oxygen, every fleeting glance between survivors, every tremor in Lauren's hands. If this recording survives, it may be the only evidence of what happened, a testament to the speed, the cruelty, the relentlessness of a force beyond comprehension. If I survive, it is a warning. If I do not, it is a record of the end of a city, the fall of a hospital, and the lives consumed within hours. By nightfall, the few remaining patients clung to life by a thread. Lauren leaned against a wall for a moment, exhausted beyond measure, whispering that we had done what we could. I nodded, knowing even that was a lie. We had done nothing to stop it, nothing to save it. Nothing could stop what had begun. And still, the recording continued. Because in the end, this is all we have. A record, a witness, a truth beyond denial. Outside, the storm continues to howl. Inside, life fights against the inevitable. And in the cold, isolated hospital, the last light flickers across faces I cannot save. I press on, documenting, bearing witness, and waiting for the dawn that may never come. The disease moves faster than time, faster than hope, faster than humanity. And the city, like the hospital, is succumbing minute by minute, patient by patient, breath by breath. I take a deep breath and record it all, every detail, every loss, every moment, because someone, somewhere, must know.